the bow block. You can see it's getting warmer. It's probably 70 degrees outside today in the middle of, well, I guess it's the end of March. Unusual weather. Unusual weather. I've got my sacrificial block. It's the one I'll be using is going to be thicker, but I wanted something that would give me an idea of what I wanted. So I'm going to turn it upside down. I've got a line, center line on it, on both sides, to give me a standard reference, and I'll line it up with my string, and then I've already done this. And then you kind of go in with your pencil underneath and kind of draw a rough, I'll do it on this end here. Just draw a rough idea. Right there you can see I got a rough idea. Okay, what I did then was I went and found something that's going to have about the right radius of the bow nose, and I found that the thing that was closest to it was the actual piece, the little plastic lid that we used to make the fillet on the radius on the bow itself. I put that in and then used that as a guide, and then I came out and drew tangent marks to where the lines for the sides would be going back on, to give me a reference on that. There'll be a lot of fitting and messing around, and then I took the same arc, transposed it upside down, but I added in the angle distance because the lower edge is going to be aft, so the sides are going to bevel in. So let me get on to making a cutting this out on my bandsaw, and then we'll come back. Okay, my first attempt didn't come out right. Always work with scrap first. Gives you a good idea and maybe some possibly good angles. I had a couple of good side angles. The angle on this side is dead on, but the one on here is not right. So I went ahead and remarked it up. Make sure you always remember to put top or bottom on it, just so you know what you're working with. So I'm going to take the top and I'm going to hold it upside down. And I've got a nice tight fit along the top edge. Now all I have to do is bevel back the bottom edge here, and then if it is not, I'll do some preliminary cutting on the bandsaw, but if I got a big gap, I don't care, because I'll batter in that hole. That's where I was coming up with the word batter. Fill in that hole with a big wad of Gel Magic with some tape on the bottom to hold it. Well, it's not going to sag anyway, but just fill it in with a bunch of Gel Magic and just stick it in here and put a couple screws in it before you do to line it up to come back permanently. Then put the screws in while the Gel Magic is curing. I'm happy with that. So let me go ahead and get farther along on this project. Okay, I have all the inside racer spacer rails. The little bits and pieces that go between the plywood and the full-length inner rail to give you that gapped look, or as I call a spaced rail system. I've got all the pieces figured out, how long they're supposed to be and the gaps and all that. That takes me a while, and then it's not worth videotaping to have me stand around here muttering to myself with a tape measure and some calipers to figure out how many spaces it takes to get between here and there. Doing this is like putting in a fence. You have to remember the post at the end. So if you come in a gap space, you want to have spaces at the ends where they run into the end piece at the transom, and then each one of these longer pieces for the double oarlock system and for the way I mount my mast partners to the hull in order to support the mast. But the one thing that we will have to do is to sight the inside rail. I've talked about this before. I have to put some sight marks on the outside edge of these spacers in order for them to bend to conform to the arc that I have in the hull. If you try to clamp them down, you probably will, but you'll make flat spots on this outer rail, so it'll come along in a nice arc. It'll have a flat hard spot, what I call, and then go back out again and then come into another one. So I'll put spaces on the inside. I have on 3/4 inch spacing, but I'm going to do an inch spacing this time, and I will I'll use my bandsaw. I have a stop set up on the miter gauge so I can just push it in and it'll stop. The other option is to lay it down with your marks on your workbench, and then have a scrap piece of 1/4-inch plywood laying on either side, and then just use your draw saw or your miter saw or whatever, and you just cut down to where you start scraping into the plywood on either side, and that'll give you a uniform depth cut all along the way that you need. I'll probably have about 5 or 6 cuts in, and I'll make them standard on both sides with both sets of oarlocks or support areas, and the mast partner will probably have maybe 3 or just 2. See what it takes to make it to bend. We'll come back after I do this. Okay, I got the first 2 done. You can see the series of sight marks I put in, and they go in about, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch. I also marked, remember you mark your epoxy on the side you have, and I also have here written starboard, top, aft, oarlock, so I know it'll go in here. And then now when I squeeze this together, it forms in without distorting the hull or the outer rail here. So, and it'll take on more of a curve as the longer it's set. So I got those 2 done. I'll put them back in place and go do the rest. And then once I have that finished, then I can start taking them off and applying gel magic to the backs of them and clamp them down. I won't be screwing these in place. I want to be sure that I don't have any hidden screws in behind here, even though I could mark them. There's no need to have screws on these because I'll be using big long ones on the outside to go through to tie everything together. So epoxy on this will work fine and hold it, and like I said before, the plywood surface will rip before they come off the plywood. Okay, one other thing I like to do too, when I know everything's in place and it's marked and I've got epoxy written on the other side, I'll come along and put some tick marks between the base that's going to be glued in and the part that's going to be glued to, just as added reference if I see something that comes up, or I've got some marks on the inside that I haven't erased. That gives me just a backup. So anytime you want to make certain, use your pencil. Okay, I've got all the inside rails except the spacer rails, except for the 2 up near the breast hook. I want to wait until I get more clamps and to get closer to putting the inside rail on. And I've got a couple of extra pieces on the stern to glue in, but that'll come. But I've got it almost all done on the rails, except for the inside. The spacer blocks take a lot of time for me to figure out all the spacing and the sizes and the lengths and the gaps for the plans, but once you get that down, then it goes pretty easy if you had to do it again. The only thing will be what kind of bow breast hook block system you're going to use. There's no set pattern that I've been using, so pretty much anything goes as to whatever you think you could do. You can always come back later and chop it out and do something different. So that's it for this part.